I call the Honourable Member Moana Maki.
Thank you very, very much, Mr Chair. And I wasn't sure I was going to take a call in this debate, but I thought that was an extraordinary contribution from the member who's just taken her seat. And I think it kind of highlights the lack of any kind of plan from this national government, because the example that my colleague Claire Curran gave is actually the nub of the problem, which is that what we want, the reason we're doing this is because we want to support New Zealand artists, we want to support their copyright rights, we want to make sure that they are not losing enormous amounts of money, that they are not able to continue doing what they want to do because of the illegal downloading and obtaining of their information. That's what we want to do. And that's got to be the end goal. And for Melissa Lee to say that this is like committing assault on someone, with the Labour Party saying that it's okay for someone to go out there and download illegally, which is not what Claire Curran was saying. What Claire Curran was saying was that when people go online and look for something and cannot find it anywhere else and desperately want to be able to purchase it legally, that they may eventually go to a file sharing site and find it because they weren't able to find it anywhere else. So a solution to that would be, well, we need to work out as many ways as possible that people can find this information and these products legally. It's about prevention. And this is like the National Party's approach to law and order is all about, well, at the tail end we'll pass ridiculous pieces of legislation like 3 strikes, which will do nothing to prevent crime, absolutely nothing to prevent crime. We'll do all these things at the other end of the spectrum, which is after an offence has happened, which does nothing to keep people safer at all. We will rubbish all the great work that that the Labour government did in trying to prevent crime, early intervention. We'll rubbish those, call them PC and namby-pamby, and then we'll just load up ridiculous pieces of law like the 3 strikes bill at the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff end of the spectrum. And that was what Melissa Lee was suggesting that we do in this area as well, which is that we just say we want that Labour's saying that we want to make sure that there are ways for people to access these things legally, and that's going to be the way that we solve this problem, and as well as having to have a penalty at the end. But to say that the penalty at the end is going to solve the entire problem is not being realistic. And I want to pay tribute to my colleague Claire Curran, because this has been a very difficult issue. It has been ongoing, and as the Minister and the Chair has said, a number of us have received numerous correspondence through our offices on this particular issue, and it is an issue that strikes to the very heart of the freedom that New Zealanders feel that they should have when they're accessing the internet, and whether or not the punishment fits the crime, and trying to balance that with the need to protect New Zealand artists and their work and ensure that they are not losing their livelihoods. It is a very difficult balance to get, and I want to congratulate Claire Curran for the work that she did in trying to find a compromise through that, and trying to find a safeguard which is not perfect by any means, but not perfect at all, but it is a compromise, it is a safeguard. We didn't have to do that. We're in opposition. The government had the numbers to push through the original law as it was. We could have just said, well, we'll rail against it and shout into the wind and say how terrible it all is, but we actually want to be constructive in this area, and we actually want to find a solution that works and also protects the rights of New Zealanders to not feel that they've got this kind of big brother, over-the-top government approach coming down on top of them. And it hasn't been easy, but that's what a responsible opposition does. That's what the responsible opposition has done in this case. And as we said, it's not entirely perfect. If we were in government, we probably would be doing it differently, having learnt from the experience of going through this when we were in government as well. But a compromise is not a dirty word, and compromise in this respect and in this regard is far better than what would have gone through had Claire Curran, as our spokesperson, not put that work in to try and find something which allayed some of the concerns for all those people out there who are contacting us before the last election and post the election around their concerns about the excessive nature of that particular penalty under the law. And I was disappointed, I think, that the Minister and the Chair chose to attack my colleague David Parker in the way that he did. I think the issues that David Parker were raising were actually very sensible ones. The Minister said that it was...
Mr Chairman.
I call the Honourable Minister Nick Smith.
Mr Chairman, I do want to respond to a few of the points that have been raised by members to add to the debate we're having this evening. The first of those I want to respond to is from the Green Party and Gareth Hughes, because there's a fundamental problem for the Green Party. They do not understand that rights go with responsibility. And it doesn't matter what area of endeavour it goes, just as with this area with the internet, they're very strong on rights, very light on responsibilities. And the question I have for the Green Party is this. At the end of the law, we have, with respect to our transport system, a right for people to drive a car. But we also have in our law, the responsibility goes with that, and the ultimate sanction for the courts to take someone's driver's licence off them and to prohibit them from being able to drive because of the broader public good. And frankly, our road transport system that requires order would not operate without that. If we go to another sector, telephones, basic right, member rightly says historically, telephones have become a pretty essential part of life. Yet in our laws it is possible. If somebody abuses the privilege of a telephone, that they use it for improper purpose, they give abusive phone calls or the like, the courts have the sanction to take away that person's telephone as the ultimate sanction for not respecting that right and the responsibilities that go with it. And we've got other areas. For instance, if you take the radio telecommunications and you use the old walkie-talkies and those sort of forms of earlier communications, again there are rights that are balanced with responsibility. Now, what this bill provides is a whole lot more checks about the steps that need to be gone through. But ultimately, we are saying that if we cannot control the Wild West and the abuse of copyright, then the law needs to have the ultimate sanction to be able to suspend a person. That is the proper trade-off that goes in societies of rights and responsibilities that we as government bring to this debate. Now, I also want to respond to some of the points that were made by David Parker, because I really do think it's exposed some pretty flawed thinking. And what David Parker argued was this: copyright is a monopoly. Copyright is a monopoly. Well, actually, I think the members got it all wrong. Copyright is actually about a property right, a private property right. If a person like Dave Dobbin creates a magnificent piece of music like Loyal, are we saying that we oppose him being able to control the distribution and use of that? That he's exhibiting monopoly rights over his creation? How different is that to me expressing my monopoly rights over the house that I own, or the monopoly rights that I have over my car, or as an engineer over a creation that I make in my field of endeavour? For the Labour Party to align copyright rights with a monopoly right, I really think is a flawed perspective. And the gall of David Parker as a Minister of Energy in charge of the electricity network when we saw the highest price increases ever in the history of New Zealand, 72% increase in power prices during the previous Labour governments in charge of the electricity network, to be now standing up in this House lecturing a government that's actually seen substantially less. I've got the actual figures. During Labour's period in government, power prices went up by 8% per year. In the first 2 years of this government, they've gone up by 4% per year average. And remember, that includes the introduction of the emissions trading scheme and the increase in GST. And I have to say to members of the Labour opposition...
Point of order.
The Minister trying to say it's got nothing to do with the current bill. It's no relevance whatsoever.
Well, the member's actually replying to previous issues raised in the debate, and he can do that for a little while. Call the Honourable Nick Smith.
It was Mr Parker that somehow in this debate introduced the issue of power prices, and I just wanted to tell a few home truths as to what's actually been going on in that sector. And I can understand if I was a Labour member that I'd be pretty defensive and not wanting to hear a few hard facts about what's actually happened with power prices. I want to stress again that I think Simon Power and the Select Committee and the officials have done a really balanced, sensible job on this important bill.
I call the Honourable Member Jacinda Ardern.
Mr Chair, I